Welcome to the PRE-SONA virtual presser featuring the Human Development and Poverty Reduction Cluster. Kanina po mga kabayan, napanood po natin ang komprehensibong report ng HDPR cluster sa pangunguna po ni Secretary Rolando Bautista. And to answer or respond to questions from our media friends, we have this virtual presser just right after the PRE-SONA forum. And joining with us today, our Cabinet Secretary Carlo Alexi Nograles, sir. Secretary Rolando Bautista of the Department of Social Welfare and Development. Secretary Leonor Briones of the Department of Education. Secretary Francisco T. Duque III of the Department of Health. Secretary Eduardo D. Del Rosario of the Department of Human Settlement and Urban Development. Secretary Noel K. Filonco of the National Anti-Poverty Commission. Secretary Francisco P. Acosta of the Commission on Filipinos Overseas. Secretary Teodoro L. Locsin Jr. of the Department of Foreign Affairs. Secretary Fortunato de la Peña of the Department of Science and Technology. Secretary Isidro S. La Peña of the Technical Education and Skills Development Authority. Secretary Silvestre Bello III of the Department of Labor and Employment. Secretary Abdullah Mamao, the Presidential Advisor on OFW Concerns. And also, yes sir, Secretary Duque of the Department of Health. And also to the officials as cluster members joining us via Zoom today, I would like also to welcome our participants from the media, undersecretaries, assistant secretaries from different agencies. We have more than 30 media who registered to participate with us from across the globe. Thank you for joining us. This virtual presser is on the record and we have a live streaming on the Presidential Communications Operations Office page, PCOO Global Media Affairs Facebook page, and other PCOO affiliated FB pages. We will be live later on PTV. And before we proceed to the Q&A session, a couple of mechanics for the media to facilitate the Q&A session. All right, so while habang hinihintay po natin ang mechanics, now we have to, may I call on Secretary Carlo Nograles for the opening statement before we proceed with the Q&A session.
Thank you again, Asek. So thank you very much to all of the cabinet secretaries here present. As mentioned a while ago, we had our HDPRC cluster report. Nauna na pong nag-report yung EDC at IC. Ito po ay nung ginanap ng how many months ago. And then now we're now beginning again our major PRE-SONA forums beginning with HDPRC today, then the PGC cluster on Friday, then next week yung dalawang naiwang cluster which is SJPC and the SICAM cluster. Everything leading towards the ultimate final State of the Nation address of the President on the 4th Monday of July. Again, this is our way of informing the public all of the accomplishments under the term of President Duterte. We had our regional PRE-SONA forums in 12 different regions para mailatag din po natin yung iba't ibang mga accomplishments in the different regions. Just to emphasize na sa dami ng mga programa ni Pangulong Duterte, per region has its own specific sets of accomplishments. And now we're doing the cluster reports as we have always done in the past PRE-SONAs. All the more right now, very important dahil kino-cover na po natin yung past 5 years under the administration of President Duterte. Then ultimately, we are all eager and waiting for the State of the Nation address of the President come fourth Monday of July.
Thank you, Kabsec. All right, now the floor is open for the question and answer session. Our first question will come from Melo Acuña of the Asia Pacific Daily. Melo?
Good morning, Assistant Secretary J.V. Arsena. My question goes to Secretary Briones because I was told, I got some figures that a great number of Filipinos have remained unemployed. And once a breadwinner is unemployed, it will translate to poverty. So my question for the good Secretary of Education is, how has poverty affected the Filipino child's desire to pursue online classes, whether it's blended learning? Because prior to COVID-19, we also saw reports that there is a significant number of pupils who fail to have breakfast before going to class. Secretary Briones, please.
Thank you for that very important question. Even before the pandemic, it has always been very clear to the entire world and not just to the Philippines that there is a clear link and divide between poverty, the level of poverty of a country, and also the opportunities for education. That has been very clear right from the beginning through the many crises that we have suffered as a global community and as a country like the Philippines. So how is it affecting our enrollment? We already said very, very clearly right from the beginning that the reductions in enrollment, for example, for last year, this was last October, was really focused on the private sector schools. There was a very clear increase in the enrollment in the public sector schools because there was migration from private schools to public schools. And at the same time, there were very significant reductions in the enrollment in the private schools because education is related to the state of employment, to the state of poverty. We recognize the problem of poverty, and we also know that poverty is very closely linked to employment. Also, we will recall that at the start of the pandemic, we have hundreds and thousands of overseas workers who went home to the Philippines, and they had no assurance of jobs. And of course, the education of children was affected. We have noticed, though, that the number of schools, particularly for basic education, who have informed us that they will not be opening their schools like last October, has now decreased. And maybe it is due also to the improvements, to the loosening up of the economy, which has also created job opportunities for parents. To summarize, poverty and education have always been closely interrelated. We did not need a pandemic to tell us that because that was already the situation. And therefore, the challenge for governments, not only the Philippines, but the rest of the world, is to compensate that gap. Especially right now, the trend in communications, in education, of course, is towards digitalization, towards technology, and that even worsens or exacerbates the gap even more. And this is where the government has to come in. And DepEd has been campaigning with the assistance of the Department of Finance, the private sector, the multilaterals, for help in this direction, for digital tools, gadgets for our children, not only for our children, but also for our teachers. The challenge has always been there, especially the challenge towards digitalization and technology, even before the pandemic. But such challenge has been worsened. Now, on the matter of face-to-face, I already said that it is the President's decision on the opening of classes, etc., which will determine the degree to which we will be able to pilot the possibilities of face-to-face. All those who are interested in education know the importance and the significance of face-to-face sessions. The children need it, the teachers need it, the parents need it, the schools need it, but we also have to protect them from the dangers and the threats of COVID-19. And this is the major consideration of the President. And we are hoping and we are looking forward to the time when the environment will be more favorable, hopefully by August, if and when the President decides to open schools in August or September, as he assesses the situation of our teachers and our learners. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary.
Thank you very much, Secretary. Thank you. I just have another concern for Secretary Bello and Secretary Anyo, because it's been reported that the number of Filipinos entering informal self-employment and unpaid work is also worsening. According to some figures, people self-employed work without any paid employees climbed to about 12.7 million, with an increase of 1.6 million from 11.1 million in January 2020. My question for Secretary Anyo is, wouldn't failure to land decent jobs result into criminality? And for Secretary Bello, what specific programs have you to generate an employment for those who are unemployed at the moment? Thank you very much, ASEC. Thank you.
Secretary Bello.
Thank you, Melo. Thank you very much. But can you repeat the first portion of your question?
Yes, Secretary. It's been said that the number of Filipinos entering informal self-employment and unpaid work is worsening. According to the figures, self-employed work without any paid employees climbed to 12.7 million, with 1.6 million increase from 11.1 million in January 2020. And that unpaid family workers rose to 3.6 million from 932,000. Or there was an increase of 932,000. So that's all I have, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you very much, Melo. Actually, you are correct in your figure that the informal workers were greatly affected by the pandemic. And that is because of the resulting increase in quarantine and health protocols that have to be implemented to protect our countrymen. This resulted in the displacement of many of our informal workers. Not only the informal workers, in fact, even the formal workers were affected. And even our foreign workers, overseas Filipino workers, there were about not less than 600,000 of our OFWs were displaced because of this pandemic. For this, we tried everything and adopted a lot of policies and measures to protect our workers. And this, frankly, this resulted in lessening the percentage in unemployment and underemployment. As of today, we were able to reduce the percentage by 1.1% in terms of unemployment and another 1.4% in terms of underemployment. Yung pong sinasabi ninyo na yung mga informal workers na affected because of yung displacement nila, that is also true. However, na-address namin ito with our 3 major amelioration programs. And one of the most popular program is the TUPAD, which is the tulong sa panghanap buhay ng mga displaced workers. TUPAD for short, which means an emergency employment program where our former workers are provided with 10 to 30 days emergency work, and they are paid the minimum wage in the region where working. In terms of the formal workers, marami sa ating mga formal workers, meaning those employed who were displaced permanently, temporarily, some were retrenched, some were given what we call the flexible working arrangement, which resulted in the reduction of their working hours. This became the subject of our camp. This is the COVID-19 Adjustment Measure Program, where we provided all these affected formal workers with a one-time cash assistance of 5,000 pesos. Sa ano naman, sa mga overseas Filipino workers, we were able to provide them the program which we call AKAP. AKAP means Apod Kamay sa pagtulong sa mga OFW. Under this program, we gave all the displaced OFWs a cash assistance of $200 for those inside OFWs na nasa abroad pa. Pero yung nakauwi na po na OFW, we provided them the equivalent of 10,000 pesos. Na in addition to this, we call the national implemented by OWA. Under this program, they can get a financial assistance. They can also get what we call the livelihood assistance from them, from the OWA, which can even involve 100 to 1 million pesos to group OFWs. Yun po ang answer ko doon, Mr. Melo.
Thank you po. Para po kay Secretary Anyo, hindi po kaya kayo nakakakita ng problema sa ating kriminalidad kung maraming walang hanap buhay?
Thank you, Mela. On the point of view of peace and order, yes, it may be a concern, but not a serious concern. It has been more than a year when we have this pandemic, and to compare the crime volume last year up to this point, nagkaroon tayo ng 40% decrease ng crime volume. So meaning to say, wala tayong masyadong problema sa peace and order. Unlike in other countries, no, sa mga YouTube makita natin, may isang van na iniwan tapos nag-looting na yung mga tao doon. No? Dito sa atin, we have not seen looting incidents because during this pandemic, of course, we deployed a lot of PNP uniformed troops through the Joint Task Force COVID-19. And we have made a lot of intervention as what Secretary Bello has enumerated. And that is actually the function of the Human Development and Poverty Reduction cluster. In fact, many of them have been hired as contact tracers. And we have this Balik Probinsya program where some of those informal workers who lost their job opted to go back to the provinces. And with the partnership with our LGUs, they were welcome and even given chances and livelihood programs. So this is really a whole of nation approach wherein we addressed all concern by the different clusters of the cabinet. So far I can say that with our law enforcement, with the cooperation of other stakeholders, we are able to address these growing people who lost their job or become informal workers. But as the vaccines are coming in, we are nearing to the new normal, and probably this would open up more jobs for our parents. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretaries. Thank you, Assistant Secretary Arsena.
Thank you.
Have a nice day. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Melo Acuña. Thank you, Secretary Anyo. Once again, thank you for joining us in our virtual presser today. Next question from the President of Malacanang Press Corps, Ms. Evelyn Quiroz of the Filipino Mirror. Question for Secretary Rolando Bautista. Senator Pacquiao has said that it is highly questionable how StarPay, one of the DSWD's financial service providers, only had 500,000 downloads, but SAP was disbursed to 1.8 million beneficiaries. Can you shed light on the alleged discrepancy?
Maraming salamat, ASEC. Unang-una, no, with regards to the allegation of Senator Manny Pacquiao, we would like to emphasize that there are no missing funds relative to the implementation of the Social Amelioration Program second tranche in the form of the financial service providers. Just to give you a backdraft of how the financial service providers were chosen and selected. Initially, we have a MOA with the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, apparently to help us, the DSWD, in terms of technical assistance. For all we know, when we talk about financial expertise and other process relative to the financial systems and procedures, particularly the financial service providers, we need really their assistance. So apparently, there are, we invited financial service providers. And at the course of the selection, from the start, the Bangko Sentral of the Philippines is with us. And there are set of criteria and qualifications on who should be qualified to implement the digital payments. So meaning to say, all the financial service providers and the TOR that was crafted and formulated was also in line with the guidance of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. So when we talk of the qualifications of the financial service providers, the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas and us, we believe that they met the criteria. So, with regards to the StarPay, part of the memorandum of agreement is there are liquidation process. No? So sa part po ng mga financial service providers, in fact, we also part of the MOA, there are timelines, checkpoints on the implementation of the digital payment. And apparently, we set a deadline sometime April that we terminated the implementation of the financial service providers, and they submitted their liquidation. Meaning to say that there are liquidation reports of the financial service providers. And ang ginawa natin dito, of course, continuous ang reconciliation of records. And from time to time, there are coordination with the financial service providers. On the side of the DSWD, we religiously submit reports to the Oversight Committee of the Senate, of the Congress, OP, and DBM. So, meaning to say, those reports are comprehensively stated therein, our accomplishment. And ayun nga, with those reports, doon nakikita if there are some anomalies or irregularities. Kaya ayun ang masasagot namin if we will be asked to appear to any investigation, then we are willing to say our piece and prove that the allegation will not hold ground because we have reports and documents to disprove the said allegation.
Thank you, Secretary Bautista. For Secretary Isidro La Peña or anyone from TESDA, question from Evelyn Quiroz of Filipino Mirror. Due to the pandemic, enrollment in formal education institutions suffered a decline, but TESDA enrollment reached a total of 1.6 million applicants for their various online skills training courses. What training courses are being prioritized by TESDA at the moment? Secretary La Peña.
For the question,
Ulitin ko.
this is the DDG Alina Sarmiento. So for this year, especially during the pandemic, TESDA prioritized agriculture and construction. Agriculture because this is in support of food security. We have to really teach our kababayans how to grow their own food so that the food security in the country will be really supported. And of course, construction because of the Build program of the administration. So those are the two priority programs. Next in the line of priorities is IT BPM. IT because, as you all know, we are all holding our meetings virtually. Even our classes are being held virtually. So we really need workers who can support the IT. Reason why the second in the list of priorities is IT BPM. Next is health. The health sector. TESDA is supporting the efforts of the government, especially the Department of Health. We have increased the number of slots for courses like or training programs like barangay health services, contact tracing, emergency medical services, and other health-related programs. And of course, the priority programs because we know that in the tourism sector, there are many displaced workers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. For Secretary Francisco Acosta, still of the Filipino Mirror and the president of Malacanang Press Corps. Question is, as the head of the Commission on Filipinos Overseas, what are the programs that you instituted which you believe will be remembered by the OFWs?
Well, thank you very much for the question. Our clientele consists of are not OFWs, no? The OFWs fall under the jurisdiction of the Department of Labor, specifically the POEA and the OWA. While our agency, we take care of the overseas Filipinos which fall under the classification of immigrants, those who are going abroad for marriage or the fiancés of foreign nationals, or those who go abroad on a J1 visa, which is the exchange visitors program of the United States, and those going as au pairs. Now, what was the question again, sir?
What are the programs that you instituted which you believe will be remembered by the OFWs?
Now, with that qualification, I would say that the programs that we've instituted primarily is we made our registration of our clientels easier in the sense that we were able to timely adjust to online. both in registration and in payment of registration fees, and in reaching out to our overseas Filipinos, we were able also to enhance our engagement capabilities through online, no? With the assistance, of course, of our foreign post and Filipino communities and organizations abroad. Before, we had to go on a road show, which we call Ugnayan, in order to reach out to our Filipinos abroad. But right now, we are reaching out to more Filipinos through online Ugnayan. And we had done that in most places where there are concentration of Filipinos, like in the United States, in Korea, in Japan, and in Canada. And our program is ongoing. So we will be remembered probably for having engaged in most Filipinos, no? Kasi it's very difficult to reach out to our Filipino migrants. They are very busy. And when we go out, when we go to see them, maybe at most you will have a gathering of 50 to 60 Filipinos. But right now, in online, we can reach out to as much as 1,000 in one online program.
Okay, thank you, Secretary Acosta. Again, uulitin ko po, kasama po natin dito sa stage, ulitin ko po, Secretary Del Rosario, Secretary Bautista, Secretary Nograles, Secretary Duque, Secretary Mamao, Secretary Felonco, Secretary Bello, and Secretary Briones. Also joining us virtually, I would like to acknowledge our guests joining us virtually. We have Chairperson Prospero de Vera. From NEDA, we have Yusek Rosemary Edelion and Asek Carlo Bernardo Abad Santos. From TESDA, DDG Lina Sarmiento. From NNC, we have Executive Director Dr. Azucena Dayanghirang. From DOST, we have Yusek Sancho Maborang and Assistant Regional Director Wilfredo Sibal. From CFO, we have Yusek Astra Naik and Secretary Acosta. From NSC, we have Secretary Hermogenes Esperon Jr., Yusek Vicente Agdamag, and ASEC Maria Carmina Acuna. From PLLO, Yusek Antonio Gallardo. From OES, Yusek Ricardo Bernabe III. From PMS, Yusek Ferdinand Guy Jr. From okay, wala po palang DFA. Okay, next question will come from Lip Wang of Guangming Daily, China. Lip?
Hi, good afternoon, Executive. Good afternoon, everyone. My question is about poverty reduction. Poverty reduction is also Chinese government's main project. And may I get any secretary to comment on the achievement of Chinese government on this issue? And do you think Philippines and China can cooperate more on this issue, the poverty reduction? Thank you.
Thank you, Lip.
Yeah, please, thank you.
For Secretary Felonco.
Yeah, I think the question is posed to my agency, the National Anti-Poverty Commission, considering that the NAPC has closer engagement with China, especially on the International Poverty Reduction Center of China. And if I got the question right, it seems that what are the activities being made by National Anti-Poverty Commission and the government vis-a-vis poverty reduction that will contribute also to the worldwide efforts to alleviate poverty. For the information of the person who asked the question from, I think, from China, the NAPSI has been very active in the China and ASEAN poverty reduction activities. We have been always invited to become the resource persons to share our Philippine experiences on poverty reduction and eradication, especially that we have this COVID-19 pandemic. And as you can see, sir, the poverty reduction and eradication efforts of the Philippine government had been reported just this morning by the chair of the Human Development and Poverty Reduction Cabinet Cluster, no? And everything there, it covers our intervention and engagement in education, in social protection, and our efforts to help our 14 basic sectors in terms of employment, livelihood, and to uplift their living condition as our response to the COVID-19 pandemic, which really affected many of our 14 basic sectors. And I think before the pandemic, the Philippines has been very successful in fighting poverty. In fact, as reported, we were able to uplift 6 million Filipinos from poverty. Of course, we know already how the COVID-19 pandemic affected our poor people. But rest assured, sir, we are looking up China experience wherein you are able to uplift 800 million Chinese, and we are seeing you as our inspiration in having our poverty reduction activities, programs, and projects here in the Philippines. There's still way to go, but with the leadership of our President, Rodrigo Duterte, and the cabinet secretaries and all government workers, we will be able to achieve the target of this administration, which is to lower down the poverty incidence to 14% by 2022. So that's my answer to your question, sir.
Thank you, Secretary Felongco. Yusek Rosemary Edelion, meron po ba kayong idadagdag from NEDA?
Yes, thank you for the question. And actually, like what Secretary Noel has mentioned, we really are looking very closely at the experience of China. We have seen that they have done so many reforms, actually in agriculture, in their industrial policy, and also their trade policy. So all these things, we're willing to help. We're willing to have this closer collaboration. There's so many things that we're able. It's always a better option to have a face-to-face meeting, so to speak, with the policymakers, with the program designers. We know that we can learn a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yusek Edelion. Lipuang?
Thank you, sir, so much for my question. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you, Lip Wang of Guangming Daily, China. Next question will come from Melissa Lopez of CNN Philippines. Melissa?
Yes, good afternoon to our secretaries. My first question is for the DSWD, but other secretaries may answer if they deem it relevant. I wanted to ask, sir, are you satisfied with the pace and the amounts that we gave for the social amelioration programs in the past year of the pandemic? And please clarify reports. You reported earlier that you have distributed 220.7 billion pesos in aid. How much more is left which has not been dispersed? Because I understand there are some LGUs still chasing after unreleased balances to beneficiaries, even if it was supposed to be distributed in April and May last year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So maybe we can start with is the social amelioration program, or are there enough funds for to caution the effects of the pandemic? Based on our experience, if you will recall, the Bayanihan 1 were given to the low-income persons. No? Apparently, the data can be taken from the Philippine Statistics Authority based on the projection for the number of low income for year 2020. But apparently, because of the pandemic, nadagdagan yon. Kasi we're talking here of OFWs who lose their job, yung mga middle income earners, they lose their job. So when we talk of the initial budget given for the implementation of the social amelioration program, which is more or less 200 billion, no? 200 billion pesos. Again, sabi nga natin, it only covers yung mga low income. So if we will also include yung mga affected and the middle income earners who were affected, sasabihin natin na nakulang yon. But to cover the shortage of those funds, merong existing program ang DSWD, which is the assistance to individuals in crisis situation. This is a regular program apparently to address. And at the same time, accept those who go to the different field offices para manghingi ng sinasabi nating ayuda. Actually, the SAP reduces the number of Filipinos who will become poor to about 410 families or 2.82 individuals. Kaya masabi natin na malaking naitulong ang SAP. But I believe the both houses, or apparently the House of Representatives, have already submitted their proposal for the Bayanihan 3, and it is now at the Senate. In a way, the DSWD, we support whatever social amelioration program, or they term it as Bayanihan 3, for the affected of the pandemic 3. Based on the projection of the DOH and as well as NEDA, the problem of pandemic will escalate until 2022. So kailangan talaga meron tayong pangbigay, no? In the form of depending on the budget, depending on the amount, ang gagawin naman natin ng DSWD dyan is it will implement based on the provisions stated on whatever law it will be, whether it will be Bayanihan 3. Okay. Yung second question, can you again,
Melissa?
yeah. And I think yung PISCO, the NEDA can make a rejoinder on this because it states on the projection.
Thank you, Secretary Bautista. I think Secretary Briones would like to add a comment.
Thank you for the question. Insofar, mention was made of the Department of Education, so I'd like to inform the audience that insofar as the Bayanihan funds are concerned, we have on record 90% implementation of the distribution of the Bayanihan benefits which were allocated to the department. So if you can give me your email address, then I can give you the details of how these funds were disbursed. Pero 90% as of last week ang distribution. So yung lumabas kung minsan na mas mababang numbers, probably hindi pa yun na-update. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Briones. Melissa?
Yes, sir. I wanted to go back lang dun sa second part of the question kay Secretary Bautista po, yung pace of the distribution. Kasi po, I understand may mga LGUs po na naghahabol pa din yung releases for some beneficiaries to this day, kahit po dapat last year natapos na siya.
Yeah, thank you. I believe you are talking here of the Social Nomination Program second tranche, which is the utilization of the financial service providers. Actually, there's really a delay with regards to the payment using the financial service providers. Alam naman po natin na nagkaroon po tayo ng talagang lacking in data in terms of the number of beneficiaries. On the side of the DSWD, we only have the data from our beneficiaries, particularly on PRE-SONA, unconditional cash transfer, and the senior citizens. Now, on the side of the LGUs, they have also their constituents, their names, and other data. But apparently, for the financial service providers, they have to really find, kailangan i-check nila yung mga beneficiaries based on the list submitted by the DSWD. And nagkakaroon ng delay kasi unang-una, because of data quality issues, may mga instances na mali lang yung birthday, mali lang yung address. At the same time, hinahanap ng mga financial service providers yung tao. During the pandemic, maraming mga na-relocate na mga persons from one place to the other. And ang proseso kasi ng ating FSB is really just to ensure that the benefits, the ayuda, will be received by qualified beneficiaries. Meron silang tinatawag na know your client. And this is part of the agreement in our MOA and part of the liquidation. Na kailangan talaga yung naka-receive is this guy, dito nakatira, and of course yung pirma. And with the situation, ito rin yung naging challenge sa ating mga financial service providers, which they articulated to us. Yung naging problema sa lockdown, ECQ, na they have scheduled the conduct of the payout using the conduits, pero may mga restrictions ang mga LGUs, no? Hindi pwede pumasok kasi high risk do sa barangay na yon o kaya sa sitio na yon. Kaya yun yung naging challenges. But as I have mentioned earlier, na when the DSWD noticed na talagang hindi na mahanap ng mga financial service providers ang mga beneficiaries. We terminated their services and we told them to liquidate. Yung mga hindi nila nabigyan, hindi na nila mahanap. Tinurn over sa amin and we do the manual payout. In short, ang DSWD, through our field offices, kami na ang naghanap doon sa mga hindi mahanap ng mga financial service providers. No. Kaya nagkaroon talaga ng delay kasi i-check, pag nung dumating sa amin yung mga unserved, we term it as unserved, titignan namin ngayon. Hahanapin namin yan. Kaya nga we express our apology to all the LGUs dahil the cause of delay is really caused by sinasabi nating pandemic. At the same time, ang isa pang cause dito is whenever there is a scheduled payout, minsan hindi pumupunta yung beneficiary doon. We don't know the reason why. That's why nung kami na nagma-manual payout, hinihintay namin yon and we reschedule for another payout.
Thank you, Secretary Bautista. Melissa?
Thank you po. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa Lopez of CNN Philippines. From Jenna Balauro of GMA News. This question is for Secretary Duque. Pwede rin pong sagutin ni Secretary Nograles as the IATF co-chair. Indonesia takes over India in terms of COVID-19 cases. Magkakaroon ba o may plano ba na travel ban to those coming from Indonesia? How will you rate your agency's pandemic response?
Well, para po doon sa unang katanungan kung i-extend ba tayo or expand ang travel ban to Indonesia, nag-aantay lang po tayo ng kasagutan mula sa OP, but the IATF has already recommended that Indonesia be included in the list of countries that we initially imposed travel ban. Now, the second question will take more than a day to answer. Response to the pandemic, but I guess the numbers will tell you the story. We have been able to bring down the number of COVID cases. Our active cases today is around 4%, more or less. Our recovery rate is at about 95%. And we have maintained a relatively low case fatality rate at about 1.76% of total cases. Now, we continue to intensify our 5 strategic pillars that underpin our pandemic response beginning last year when the pandemic first came to the Philippines. And the 5 strategic pillars are, number 1, the prevention interventions. And we have ramped up our information, education, and communications campaign such as the BIDA solution of the Department of Health, yung bawal ang hindi naka-mask and face shield, isanitize ang kamay, dumistansya ng hindi i-exceed sa isang metro, at ang pag-alam ng tama at makatotohanang impormasyon, labanan ang mga pinagmumulan ng mga fake news at mga kasinungalingan at walang mga katuturan na mga impormasyon na ang pakay lamang ay magdulot ng kalituhan sa lipunan at sa ating pong mga kababayan. Ngayon, yung ating pong marami tayong iba't ibang mga information, education, and communications campaign programs. No? Meron tayong BIDA May Disiplina ng Department of Interior and Local Government. Meron po tayong 4 dapat na atin pong ibinaba na rin sa mga pamahalaan lokal. Ito po ay galing sa atin Health Professionals Alliance Against COVID at meron din po tayong yung sa transport sector naman, yung tinatawag natin na 7 Commandments. So lahat po ito ay para maging sapat ang paalala at ang mga abiso sa atin po mga kababayan na tumalima sa mga panuntunan ng Interagency Task Force on Emerging Infectious Diseases at lalong-lalo na po ang Department of Health. Ang pangalawa pong humahaligi sa atin pong tugon sa pandemyang ito ay ang tinatawag natin early detection. Sa pamamagitan po ng atin aggressive testing, ang atin pong aggressive isolation, and of course, yung active case finding by way of influenza-like illness surveillance, ang ating severe acute respiratory illness, also part of the surveillance system, at ang atin po pinaigting na quarantine and isolation ng mga taong identified as contacts, no, of the confirmed or probable case. This is done through our Oplan Kalinga. And then the continuing improvements in the clinical management of severe to critical COVID cases. And we salute all of our healthcare workers, the doctors, the nurses, and all those who have contributed to the successful clinical management of our COVID cases, and also for helping bring down to a low levels, again, relatively speaking, of our deaths. No? Our case fatality rate remains below 2%. It's at 1.7%, much less than the global case fatality rate of about 2.2%. So, ito po ang gagawin natin. We will continue to intensify, all of which will lead to our, we need to do everything. We need to intensify our PDITR strategy. Gusto po natin ay mapababa panlalo ang ating mga kaso. At today, our case, I have been told, is at about 3,800. Yesterday was about 3,600. And hopefully, we will see a continuing decline in the number of new cases reported daily. And of course, the important component of the PDITR is the plus, which is the vaccination. And I'm glad to announce to everyone that we have now reached 14 million jabs, and 10 million have received first jab, and 4 million have already received the completed jabs. No? And yesterday, I was just informed by our Deputy Chief Implementer, Secretary Vince Dizon, that so far yesterday was our highest output of 375,000 inoculations. No? So we are starting to get closer to our goal of 500,000 jobs a day. No? And if we are able to do that, we will be able to reach our 70% target population. That's about 70 million Filipinos, to have their first dose in about 130 days. No? So that's about 4 months and 10 days from today. No? And hopefully another 2-3 months to complete the second dose for the same population of 70 million Filipinos. And by then, hopefully, we shall have reached our herd immunity. So, yun lang po ang akin masasabi sa ngayon. Salamat po.
Thank you, Secretary Duque. Next question will come from Jen Galvez of Vanguard Radio Network. Jen?
Good afternoon, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. Sir, this question is for Secretary Nograles and for another for Secretary Duque. For Secretary Nograles, sir, there's a recent report po that about 4.2 million Filipinos got hungry in the last 3 months. This is, I think, released by SWS. How does this play po dun sa inyong advocacy ending hunger, considering that the Duterte administration is on its last stretch? And will we be able to see, sir, tangible results by then, before the end of his term next year?
Yes. Actually, kung titingnan mo yung SWS survey numbers, no? Before COVID happened, we were already at our lowest. Nasa 8%, 8 point something percent tayo in the fourth quarter of 2019. So that was already one of the lowest, if not the lowest. And ang ganda na ng trajectory sana na mas mapababa pa natin yan, going all the way up to the end of the term of President Duterte. Kanya lamang dumating ang COVID. So ang kwento dyan, from 8%, pagdating ng COVID, naging 16%. Yung 16% naging 20%, yung 20% naging 30% in the third quarter of 2020. And then by the fourth quarter of 2020, sa last quarter, napabagsak natin into 16%. Ngayon, sa the last SWS survey, itong nilabas nila ngayon, na-retain yung 16%. But if you divide that into the different regions, yung hunger sa NCR, bumaba na. But yung hunger sa Mindanao, tumaas. At yung hunger sa rest of Luzon and sa Visayas, tumaas din ng konti. So, kumbaga, the overall number na nag-plateau or nag-stay siya at 16% level of hunger. So that being said, ano po ang nakikita nating lessons dito? Number one, the more that we open up the economy and get more people back to work, the more we will be able to drive the hunger numbers down. So napaka-importante po talaga ng vaccination rollout natin. The more na marami tayong mabakunahan, especially when we open up to A4 and A5, and that comes with a more supply of vaccines coming into the country. We're very happy to note na sabi nga ni Secretary Duque, parami ng parami, no? Pataas ng pataas na rin yung vaccination output natin. And hopefully within 100 plus days, we'll hit the 70 million. So that now delivers yung confidence, consumer confidence, that delivers now the increase in economic activity, which translates to more people going back to work, hanap buhay, negosyo, babalik, at yung hunger incidents natin will be able to address that and drive that even lower. But of course, in this fight against COVID-19 and the fight against hunger, multifaceted yan eh. So lahat ng mga nandito na mga cabinet secretaries sa Human Development Poverty Reduction Cluster, tinututukan natin ang lahat ng aspeto ng kagutuman. So sa food production, kailangan po yung talagang isulong talaga na mas mabilis yung plant program ng Department of Agriculture at iba pa mga kagawaran at ahensya tungkol sa agriculture. No? Yung build will deliver more jobs also for more Filipino people. Sa pagdating sa food production din, ang 4Ps natin, we're also pushing our 4Ps beneficiaries to plant and grow their own food. Meron tayong binubuhay natin yung paaralan, yung gulayan sa paaralan with the Department of Education, gulayan sa barangay so that people can grow their own food para maging mas accessible ang masustansyang pagkain down to the community level. Of course, yung ating nutrition, pagdating sa aspeto ng nutrition, nandyan yung National Nutrition Council, yung tutok kainan program nila. Hopefully, we'll be able to expand that para mas maraming mga nutritionally at risk pregnant women and children who are undernourished, age 6 months old to 23 months old, ay mabibigyan ng complementary food. Kahit walang face-to-face classes, ang Department of Education still continues its school-based feeding program, pero hindi na siya school-based. kasi wala pa yung face-to-face, pero dinedeliver po yan house to house. Ganon din po ang DSWD. Ang supplemental feeding program nila for children enrolled in their daycare centers or child development centers and supervised neighborhood plays. Patuloy pa rin po yan kahit walang face-to-face classes. Pagdating naman sa food accessibility, nandyan yung DTI, Diskwento Caravan, nandyan yung Ikadiwa online platform ng Department of Agriculture, nandyan yung Deliver E online platform din ng DTI para yung mga pagkain na pinoproduce ng ating mga magsasaka at mangingisda, nabebenta rin online directly to the consumers, to consuming public. There are so many aspects, but again, one final note in the fight against hunger. Government cannot do it alone. We need the help of non-government, private sector, civil society, non-government organizations, the academe, the private sector. Ordinaryong Pilipino ay may maiambag din po sa laban against gutom at malnutrition. At ginagawa rin po namin sa Task Force Zero Hunger ang lahat ng mga mechanisms kung saan nabibigyan ng opportunity din po ang non-government sector to also contribute in this fight against hunger. So the target at the end of the day, at the end of the term of the president, is to bring it back to the 8% hunger incidence if you base it on the SWS hunger survey. Again, before the pandemic happened, nandun tayo sa 8%. Right now, it's at 16%. So we have to have it pa. Kailangan ma-reduce pa natin ng 50% yan. And that's hopefully what we will pass off to the next administration, an SWS hunger incidence survey showing na pababa pa natin from 16% to 8%.
Thank you, Secretary Nograles. Jen?
Just a quick follow-up before I ask a question to Secretary Duque. Sir, Secretary Nograles, answerable by yes or no lang, sir. You think po matatapos, marirealize po yan before the end of the term of President Duterte?
Yes, because if you go by the timeline again, you will always see the close correlation between hunger and joblessness. Common sense yan. Mas maraming walang trabaho, mas maraming magugutom. Ganyan po talaga yan. So, how are we sure that we will be able to increase our economic activity, generate more jobs? Not only do we have a nurse program, which is our National Employment Recovery Strategy program, but also a lot of it is hinged in the success of our vaccination efforts. And based on what Secretary Duque has reported, we are on track in our vaccination efforts. In fact, I would like to say that we're actually as fast or even faster than what we've projected. If all things go well, at tuloy-tuloy yung vaccination rollout efforts natin, at mas maraming bakuna ang darating sa July, August, and September, so mas ma-accelerate pa yung vaccination rollout natin. Mas mararamdaman po natin na mas bubukas po yung ekonomiya, mas marami po yung makakabalik ng trabaho, mas marami po ang makapaghanap buhay po muli. Hopefully, makakabalik na rin po yung face-to-face classes. Hopefully. We can go back now, transition to the new normal. All of that will happen before the end of 2021. So that will really accelerate also the faster drop in hunger incidence. So yes, we are very confident that at the end of the term ni Pangulong Duterte, which by the way coincides with a national election also, which can also help, no? Because pag nagkakaroon ng national election, mas tumataas din yung economic activities eh. That's really the reality there. Nagkakaroon ng economic activities because mas maraming mga nangyayari on the ground, no? In the different regions and provinces, no? Then I think we'll be able to deliver a second quarter um, 2022 to the next administration with a lower hunger incidence, lower than the 16% has been reported by SWS just recently.
Thank you, Secretary Nograles. Jen.
Thank you, Secretary. Sir, I just have one question, sir, kay Secretary Duque. And we checked din po, we double check kasi may mga nag-viral din na posts regarding dun sa quarantine rules pagdating po ng like people from the US, coming from the US. In example po kasi that kung halimbawa isang group or isang family, if they've been vaccinated with, say, Pfizer, which comes from the US, bakit daw po kailangan pang paghiwa-hiwalayin, sir? Medyo hindi nila makita, according to this group, hindi namin makita ang logic. Why daw paghihiwalayin ng isang family na kasamang na isang grupong dumating sa Pilipinas, vaccinated with the same vaccine that is being distributed in the Philippines, and then only to be separated daw po sa quarantine dyan sa Pilipinas na hotel of choice ng DOH. Bakit daw po, kailan daw po ito mababago, sir? At mababago daw po ito anytime soon?
Well, yung kasing quarantine setup natin, ganun talaga. No? Hiwa-hiwalay. Isang tao, isang kwarto. Hindi mo naman pwedeng pagsamasamahin lahat sa isang lugar. No? And that's how the system works. No? And we have to follow that as part of our quarantine protocol. Now, if it is causing some discomfort, we will have to refer this to the agencies that manage the quarantine facilities. So we are open to listening to some recommendations. No? But the way it is right now, we have to follow strictly our current quarantine protocols.
Thank you, Secretary Duque. Thank you, Jen Galvez of Vanguard Radio Network. Secretary Duque, may pahabol po si Jenna Balaoro kanina yung question niya about sa rate ng agency ninyo. Rate 10 is the highest. Ano po sa tingin nila o ninyo ang rating na ibibigay niyo sa agency ng DOH?
Apakahirap naman sagutin nung tanong ninyo because kung sasagutin ko ng mataas, sasabihin nyo self-serving, di ba? So siguro yung mga ganung tanong, ang pinakamagandang sumagot dyan, ang taong bayan. At meron naman mekanismo para malaman kung ano tingin ng taong bayan, kung ano ba ang performance rating ng Department of Health. So I would not want to answer that question. And we just have to wait for Pulse Asia, SWS. They do regular public satisfaction rating surveys, no? So we'll see how the DOH fares. But in the previous Pulse Asia ratings, no, through multiple surveys or a series of surveys, maganda naman ang public approval or satisfaction rating ng Department of Health. It's probably more than 70, between 70 to 80%, mga ganun po.
Thank you, Secretary Duque. Next question will come from James Patrick De Jesus of PTV. Patrick?
Good afternoon po, ASEC, and to our secretaries.
Go ahead.
Okay. I have two separate questions po for CABSEC at saka kay Sec Ed Del Rosario. For CABSEC po muna, yung sa survey nga po ng SWS on hunger, sa NCR mababa naman po yung nagsabi na nagugutom sila pero may napansin po tayong increase sa Visayas and Mindanao. Ano po yung nakita nating reason dito?
Ang palagay ko, we haven't really dissected yung nangyayari. But for instance sa Visayas, I would presume na sa Visayas po talaga very heavily dependent rin po ang Visayas sa tourism industry, no? So pag ganyan po, of course the tourism industry really provides a lot of jobs, no, and economic activity. So because of that problem, na marami pa tayong mga restrictions when it comes to tourism. Of course, marami mga naapektuhan din na mga negosyo and industries related to tourism. Kaya yung problema po nung trabaho, nagkakaroon din po ng cascading effect yan sa pagdating sa hunger incidents. Dito naman po sa Mindanao, I was looking at the numbers. There were several years also, even in past administrations, na you also see mga ganyan klaseng hunger incidents, no? In past administrations, pagdating sa hunger incidents ng Mindanao. And I think, again, it's also related, no, sa trabaho or kawalan ng economic opportunities and jobs, no. And I think also during that time that the survey was also conducted, nagkaroon din po ng mga pagbabago ng restrictions gawa ng pag-akyat baba ng kaso ng COVID-19 in certain jurisdictions in Mindanao. So minsan, it may also be a factor of kailan ginanap yung survey at kung saan ginanap ang survey na nag-coincide din po siya ng probable heightened restrictions. Maaring may mga lugar na tumaas to GCQ, may mga lugar na tumaas to a higher or nagkaroon ng heightened restrictions dahil nga sa COVID. So may ganon klase mga factors din po tayo nakikita. Ang ending po nito, kailangan po talaga natin to really pour more economic activities in these affected regions, no? Kaya napakalaki po nung magiging factor ng plant pati yung build. So the more that we can push the plant program, of course the more food production will happen, but more jobs also, especially sa rural areas at sa countryside. But more so even with the build program, mas marami rin pong mga trabaho ang mabibigay, no, ng build program. So much so na mako-cover hopefully niya yung mga industries that were affected and continue to still be affected, like for instance tourism, hotels, and all these other ibang mga negosyo na related to tourism. So hopefully pag umarangkada po, mas lalong umarangkada ang build program, nagkakaroon po ng ibang other job opportunities and economic opportunities para umikot po yung pera doon sa mga kanayunan. At the more that we see economic activity, I think the more it will drive down hunger incidents doon sa regions natin.
Thank you, COBSEC. Patrick?
Yes po, for Sec Ed Del Rosario po ng DSWD, can we ask for an update po sa rehabilitation ng Marawi City? Are we still on track sa mga projects po to be finished within this year po?
Thank you. The Marawi rehabilitation is on track despite the bad weather that is now prevalent in Marawi City and the present COVID protocol being observed. So all the projects that we have started July last year and onwards, all of this will be completed by December of 2021.
Thank you, Secretary Del Rosario. Patrick?
Ilang porsyento na po, Secretary? And nandun po kami nung May sa Marawi. Yun nga po, marami po pong ginagawang projects. Before po, bumaba si Pangulong Duterte, before matapos yung kanyang termino, ano po yung ina-expect nating itsura na po ng Marawi City?
Well, we have three major objectives in the rehabilitation. Of course, it will serve as the catalyst for growth and sustainable development. It will be a template for good governance, and we would like to ensure that peace and order will reign after the rehabilitation, because it's useless to have so many infrastructures that at the end of the day, we will not be able to achieve a very peaceful environment in the city. So those three objectives are the things that we would like to have in order to say that the rehabilitation will be successful or not. So We are on track to complete the rehabilitation by December, most of the projects, and all projects will be completed within the term of the President.
Thank you, Secretary Rosario. Thank you, Patrick De Jesus of PTV. Last live question will come from Camille Samonte of TV5. Camille.
Hello, good afternoon
Good
po,
afternoon.
Yusek.
Go ahead.
Question po kay DSWD Yusek Rolando Bautista.
Go, Camille.
Right. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, loud
Sec?
and clear po. Go ahead po.
Alright. Secretary Bautista, ngayon po ngayon po na ongoing nga po yung proposal for the Bayanihan 3. How can we assure that if ever po na ma-approve nga ito at magkaroon ulit ng panibagong ayuda para nga doon sa mga pamilya nga po na naapektuhan ng pandemya, talaga pong makarating po at magamit po lahat ng budget because I remember kanina nga po tinatanong kasi may mga natira pa po doon sa pondo na hindi po nagamit from the second tranche ng Social Amelioration Program.
Okay, thank you. No? So yung hopefully kung ma-enact into law itong Bayanihan 3, siguro let's take reference to the last social financial assistance that was provided lately lang, very lately. Ang naging konsepto doon is the budget was directly downloaded, transferred to the local government units of the NCR Plus areas. During that time, the DSWD, the DILG, and the DNG made a MOA to ensure the proper implementation ng distribution ng ayuda. At nakita natin dito na in terms of safety nets, checkpoints, timelines, nasunod ng ating mga local government units in a matter of 1 month. Siguro ang sitwasyon noon when the first emergency subsidy was implemented is hindi kumpleto ang database ng ating mga local government units. Kasi, siyempre, we were all surprised and shocked na nangyari yon. Short of saying, ang agency, the DSWD, even other agencies, even local government units are not prepared in terms of database. Kaya itong nangyari nitong special financial assistance, nakita natin na ang nag-police na nung sinasabi nating proper implementation, preemptive measures para hindi mangyari yung mga anomalies or irregularities. Talagang heavily involved ang ating mga local government units. At the same time, of course, yung enforcement for those who wants to test the system. Kasi despite yung mga sinasabing mga violations, ito mangyayari sa inyo, there are some but minimal na talagang they test the system. But of course, yung mga local government units, local chief executives, ayaw nilang mangyari yon. Kaya on their side, sila na yung nag-police ng kanilang mga, sabihin natin, mga officials. And this is a good template. Kasi what we did is, we trust our local chief executives. We rely on them. We just cite the importance of the expeditious distribution of the ayuda. And I believe, naramdaman nila ito noon, nung nagkaroon ng delay, maraming mga constituents nila ang talagang umangal. And with all the lessons that we learned in the implementation of SUP 1, I think they were all corrected and properly applied during the implementation of the special financial assistance. So hopefully, ang prayer namin, whatever will be the provisions that will be stipulated in the Bayanihan 3, let us look back and revisit the provisions that were stated in the distribution of the special financial assistance, which ang sasabihin natin dito, ang naging star of the show during that time are the local chief executives.
Thank you, Secretary Bautista. Camille? Camille Samonte?
Next question. Yes, thank you po, Sec. Next question po kay Secretary Duque. Sec, for the last 5 years po ng termino ni President Duterte, are you convinced, Sec, na nabigyan natin or na-compensate po ng maayos yung ating mga health worker pre and now that we are in a pandemic?
Yan naman po ang talagang kagustuhan ng administrasyon ni Pangulong Duterte, no? Pero meron din tayong limitasyon pagdating sa kasapatan ng pondo para ibigay ang mas maganda pang benepisyo para po sa atin mga namamayaning manggagawa pangkalusugan. At yan naman sa ngayon na nagkaroon po tayo ng pandemya, ang utos po ni Pangulong Duterte ay talagang makapagbigay ng mas malaking benepisyo dahil nga kinikilala niya ang iniaambag ng mga healthcare workers sa pagkalinga at pangangalaga at pagsalba ng buhay ng ating pong mga pasyente, hindi lamang po yung mga apektado ng COVID, kundi non-COVID cases as well, no? So kung makikita natin sa Bayanihan 1 and 2 ay malaking porsyento ng budget, pangkalahatan mga 78 billion, 45 billion for Bayan 1 and about 35 billion for Bayan 2. Sa parehong batas na yan ay malaki po ang pondo na inilaan para po sa kanilang actual hazard duty pay, para po sa kanilang tinatawag na special risk allowance, at saka doon po sa kanilang meals and accommodation and transportation allowances. So, pati rin po sa compensation ng mga healthcare workers na tinamaan ng COVID at ang mga pamilya na namatayan ng kanila pong mga healthcare workers na kapamilya na binibigyan po ng 1 milyon bawat pamilya, at para naman doon po sa mga nagkasakit, binigyan po ng anywhere from 15 to 50,000 pesos depending on the severity of the COVID infection. So, gusto pa rin natin mas mapalawig ang benepisyo, mapaunlad pang lalo, dahil nga napakamahalaga talaga ng kanila pong mga papel ginagampanan. Pero ika nga, meron talagang hindi maiwasan na mga limitations. Dahil syempre, apektado tayo, nabawasan ang koleksyon ng buwis, mga huminto, nagsara. So ito meron tawag natin pati sa kakayahan ng gobyerno na pondohan pangunahing programang panglipunan, mga social protection programs, lahat po yan ay talagang naapektuhan. Pero pagka ng malaking porsyento ng ating ay manunumbalik tayo normal, natin muli ang dating sigla ng ating ekonomiya. So pagka ganun na nangyari, tataas na naman productivity, tataas na naman ang buwis na gobyerno at mapupondohan ang mga pangunahing programa na mababenefisyuhan ang ating pong mga healthcare workers.
Thank you, Secretary Duque. Thank you, Camille.
Thank you po, Secretary.
Thank you, Camille Samonte of TV5. Panghuling tanong na lang po for Secretary Abdullah Mamao. Presidential Advisor on OFWs. Pwede rin pong sumagot si Secretary Silvestre Bello. Given that there are labor reform initiatives being undertaken by some countries in the Middle East on migrant workers, how will this impact our OFWs? Could you provide an expected or realized outcome by such an initiative? From Len Tehome of Love Radio, Poland.
Thank you very much. I'm glad that I'm given this opportunity to say something about reforms in the Middle East, especially on the Kepala system. This can be explained further by the Department of Labor. And this is actually one of the problems that our country, especially the workers and the domestic services, are encountering in the Middle East. And it is good news for all of us that countries in the Middle East like Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, and Kuwait are now disbanding the Kepala system. This is the very cause of the problems that our domestic workers in the Middle East are encountering because of the Kepala system. And with this development, we can be assured now that our domestic workers in the Middle East will be given the necessary protection and assistance by the government that are receiving our domestic workers in the Middle East. Now, one legacy that may be left by the President, insofar as the OFWs are concerned, is the creation of the Department of Migrant Workers and Overseas Filipinos. I think if this will be created, it's now in the House of the Senate, and if this will be approved in the House of the Senate, there will be a bicameral, I think, meeting between the representatives of the House of Representatives and the House of the Senate. And if this will become a law, this is the protection that can be given to the overseas Filipino workers worldwide. We have about, I think, 10 million. And this department can really protect the interest and welfare of our overseas Filipino workers worldwide, because there will be a focus of services to all our overseas Filipino workers worldwide. And if this will be created, this will be one of the legacy projects of the President. In the past, I think I can explain this because this did not reach the mass media and the social media. There were several priority projects of the President that we had done from 2016 until now. We had this problem of 11,000 stranded Philippine workers in Saudi Arabia. And our representatives, I was the lead official of the Philippine delegation that solved this problem of 11,000 stranded Filipino workers in Saudi Arabia. And with the active participation of the Department of Labor, the Department of Foreign Affairs, and the Public Assistance Office, we were able to solve the problems of the 11,000 stranded workers in 2016. There were diplomatic and labor crises that happened in the state of Kuwait. And in 2018 and 2019, we were also able to solve the diplomatic and labor crisis in the state of Kuwait with the cooperation of all the agencies of our government, especially the Department of Labor and the Department of Foreign Affairs, and our office, the Office of the Presidential Advisor on Overseas Filipino Workers, was actively involved in solving this diplomatic and labor crisis in the state of Kuwait. There were also specific things that happened. There was almost a war between Iran and the United States of America. And we were sent by the President. I was the head of the presidential team that were sent to Iran, Iraq, Turkey, to Bahrain, to the United Arab Emirates, to Qatar, and Kuwait. And we were able to get the assurance of all this government that just in case there will be war between Iran and the United States at that time, they will be given safe exit from these different countries in the Middle East. So these are things that were done in the past, and it impacted the interest of our Philippine workers worldwide, especially in the Middle East countries. And let me also explain one of those, many of those things that were done, especially in saving the lives of Philippine workers, just to emphasize the care of this administration, that even if it involved only very few overseas Philippine workers, the president sent a team to Libya. It was at the height of the civil war in Libya, and we were only saving 3 Filipino workers who were kidnapped at the time. And with the cooperation and involvement of the South Korean government, those 3 Filipino workers were later on released by the militias who kidnapped these 3 Filipino workers. And also the 7 sailors who were then detained in Libya. We were sent by the president at the height of the war between the 2 governments in Libya, the Benghazi government and the Tripoli government. And we were able to bring back to the country the 7 sailors at the time. So these are things that were done for the interest of our overseas Philippine workers worldwide. And thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to explain these important developments on the priority projects that were done by the President from 2016 until now, and the legacy of the President for the creation of the Department of Migrant Workers and Overseas Filipinos. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary Mamao. Secretary Bello, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I loved listening to my dear friend, Secretary Mamao, especially on the issue of Kapala. Anyway, that Kapala system in the Middle East is a thing of the past. Upon request of our President, all the Middle East countries started stopping the practice of Kapala. Pag ipaliwanag ko sa inyo kung anong Kapala, hahaba ang istorya natin. What is important is that all the Middle East countries, upon the request of President Rodrigo Roa Duterte, ininto na nila yung practice na yan. But what is more important in the protection of our overseas workers is the fact that there are already existing bilateral labor agreements with all the Middle East countries. And under these BLAs, there is already a proviso that all OFWs working in the Middle East will be covered by a standard contract of employment. And this standard contract of employment will provide all the provisions that the President want to be included in this contract. Number 1, that the OFW will keep in his or her possession yung pinakapaborito ng lahat, cellphone. Pangalawa, that the passport of the OFW must be kept by the OFW, or at the very least, it should be deposited with the Department of Foreign. Kasi paghawak ng employer yung passport ng ang ating OFW, hawak na nila ang lieg ng ating OFW. Kaya napaka-importante na yung pasaporte ng OFW ay nasa kamay niya o kaya nakadeposito sa DFA. Third important provision of the standard contract of employment is that may specified working hours. hindi pwedeng lalampas ng agreed number of hours. Pangalawa, meron provision of the sleeping hours of the OFW. Another provision is that the OFW has the freedom to choose his food. Another provision is that the OFW must have a break of 1 day with pay in a week's time. And then finally, ito yung effect ng kapala. Yung OFW cannot be transferred one employer to another without his or her consent and without the approval of our labor attaché. Ito na ngayon ang existing relation natin with the Middle East countries. Kaya well protected na ang ating mga OFWs. Thank you very much.
Secretary Bello, unfortunately, that was the last question that we have time for. Secretary Nograles, do you have any closing remarks? And Secretary Bautista, before ending this virtual presser.
Yes.
Secretary Bautista, Secretary Nograles first, sorry. Secretary Nograles first, to be followed by Secretary Bautista.
Yes, thank you very much, Asek. I suppose in behalf of all of the secretaries here present and those watching us virtually, joining us virtually, sa lahat ng mga bobo ng HDPRC, I think first and foremost, we would like to congratulate the chair of the Human Development and Poverty Reduction Cluster. Very commendable chairmanship of Secretary Bautista for successfully chairing HDPRC and steering it really towards the right direction. Nagbibiroan kami kanina na parang yung sa speech ni Secretary Bautista kanina, parang farewell speech na eh. Pero totoo nga, this is the last pre-SONA speech of Secretary Bautista as chair of HDPRC. And in fact, in the next pre-SONA forums, yan na po yung mga last pre-SONA speeches ng iba't ibang mga chairs, ng iba't ibang mga clusters natin. But the work still continues. No? Last pre-SONA kasi papunta na rin po tayo sa last State of the Nation address ni Pangulong Duterte. So mga kababayan, abangan nyo po ang next pre-SONA forums natin. Ngayong Friday po, gaganapin sa Cebu, but you will be able to watch it nationwide. This will be done by the Participatory Governance Cluster. And then the Security, Justice, and Peace Cluster naman next week sa July 21. At yung Climate Change Adaptation and Mitigation Disaster Risk Reduction Cluster will be on July 22. All of that leading to the ultimate and final State of the Nation address of our beloved President, President Rodrigo Roa Duterte, on July 26. Again, it's our last pre-SONA forums, but the work doesn't stop. The work doesn't stop. Patuloy pa rin po yung pagtatrabaho namin lahat ng mga chairs, lahat ng mga members, lahat ng mga cabinet secretaries, lahat ng mga ahensya, all the way up to the end of term of President Rodrigo Roa Duterte. So muli, maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat sa pag-attend nyo sa pre-SONA forum ng HDPRC, and see you in the next pre-SONA forums as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Nograles. Secretary Bautista.
Una-una siguro, pasalamatan natin ang ating Pangulong Mayor Rodrigo Roa Duterte sa lahat ng guidelines, instructions na ibinibigay niya sa lahat ng miyembro ng HDPRC at sa lahat ng ahensya ng gobyerno. Kami po, lahat ng ahensya ng HDPRC, particularly the DSWD, ay instrumento lang po kami sa pag-implementa ng pagbibigay serbisyo sa mga kapatid natin, mga kabayan nating mas lalong nangangailangan. Kaisa ng 37 mga ahensyang bumubuho sa Human Development and Poverty Reduction Cluster, kami ay lubos nagpapasalamat sa lahat ng nakibahagi sa pag-uulat at press conference ngayong umaga. Tulad ng aking nabanggit kanina, kami sa cluster ay lubos na inspirado na ipagpatuloy pa ang aming mga adhikain yung isa sa aming adhikain sa lahat ng mga miyembro ng STPRC at lahat ng ahensya. We do it for La Patria y el Amor, for the love of the country, upang mayangat ang estado ng pamumuhay ng lahat ng Pilipino para sa ating pinapangarap na matatag, maginhawa, at panatag na buhay. Magandang hapon po sa ating lahat at mabuhay ang Republika ng Pilipinas.